Hello book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. Today I'm here to do my mid-month check-in for the month of June. Alright guys, this month has been going really great, especially compared to the last few months. Not that my reading has been terrible, it's just been not as much. I've been reading about 8 books a month, and this month so far I have read 7 books, so we are doing really great so far. I've really been enjoying what I have been reading, and I'm really excited to talk to you about those books. And once we go through those reviews, I'll also talk a little bit about what I'm currently reading. I probably won't talk too much about what my plans for the rest of the month are, just because I don't really have any. I'll be taking part in the Wonderthon Readathon, which is actually started like today. It's the 15th and it'll be going through the 30th, but I haven't really planned what I am going to be reading for that yet. And if you watched my June TBR, you know that I had a pretty broad TBR to choose from, but I may give you some ideas of the next couple of books that I want to prioritize. But let's go ahead and get right into the reviews since we have quite a few to get through. So I started off the month by finishing a series, a duology specifically, by reading The Court of Wanderers by Chupeco. This is the second book to Silver Under Nightfall, which is a story that follows Remy, who is a vampire hunter, and he, despite his successes and talents, is a bit of an outsider amongst other vampire hunters because there is a rumor that he himself is half vampire because his mother, I believe, had a bit of an affair with a vampire while she was pregnant with him. However, one day there is a murder among the vampire hunters, and it also seems like some of the vampires showing up seem to be mutated, if not under some sort of spell of coercion. So Remy starts working with a royal vampire couple, Song and Zayden, to solve not just this murder, but who is behind the mutation and control of these new young vampires. And while they are going about their tasks, they are also falling in love with each other and forming a polyamorous relationship. I was a little bit disappointed by the first book. I will say it was kind of a 5-star prediction, and I only gave it 4 stars, which is still a great rating, but it did leave me wanting a little bit. And going into this book, I was a little bit nervous because I haven't actually heard the greatest things. And when I first started to read the book, I was like, uh-oh, I'm not really going to enjoy this. But by the end of the story, I ended up feeling this book was worth a 4 stars as well. It took me like a few chapters to get into it. I think that the author kind of had to get back into the rhythm of the story, but I found that I really enjoyed the character development and relationship development throughout the story. And while I sometimes found myself a little bit confused about what was going on, I don't know if that is because the author was just not explaining things properly, or things were jumping around too much, or if it's just because I'm not the smartest cookie in the cookie jar. But I definitely felt myself being like, who was that again? And I really could have benefited from a map because they kept talking about places and I was like, I don't know where that is. I have no idea where we are, where we're going. So I kept wishing that there was a map in this book. I think it really would have benefited from it. But otherwise, I thought that there was a lot of fun development throughout this story. I did enjoy the path that the story took, and the way that the story ended up wrapping up, I thought was rather satisfying. And there was even one part where I shed a little bit of a tear. So it definitely got my emotions going. So I think despite this being a relatively short, I think that the author really was able to do a full-fleshed plot and really end the story on a solid note. So I was rather satisfied with this despite going into it with lower expectations. And I definitely think that if you enjoyed the first book, that you should go ahead and jump into this one as well. Up next, I jumped into a book that I honestly should have read when it came out in April. Consider me a fake fan. I am going to be very vague about this book. There is a spoiler-filled vlog that should be coming out in July, and that is for The Sunshine Court by Nora Sakavic. This is part 1, which I was not aware of when I picked it up, but I was very happy to find out it was only part 1 when I finished the book, because I was like, that was not a satisfying ending whatsoever, but it's just part 1. That being said, this book follows a side character from the core series, the All for the Game series, which is a game that follows Xe players. Xe is kind of like soccer meets lacrosse kind of situation, and a lot of bad things happen to a lot of people, including the character that we are reading about in this book, and they are kind of trying to put themselves together after everything that happened in the core series. And honestly, even before the series, this is someone who has a lot of trauma that they have to work through, and I ended up going ahead and giving this 4.5 stars. And that's all I'm going to say about it, because I don't want to spoil anything for the main series. And this book, like I said, my spoiler-filled review will be coming out next month, so keep an eye out for that. Up next, I will have a vlog coming out next Friday that is a queer superhero vlog. So I have 2 books that I will be talking about here in this wrap-up that will be in that vlog as well. So in a way, I'm kind of spoiling you for that vlog, but I feel like that's the problem with doing mid-month wrap-ups, is that sometimes you talk about books that are in vlogs that are not coming out yet. So I'll be semi-vague, not to spoil too many of my thoughts, but I do want to talk about them here. The first of them is Igharo by Perry Morre. This is a young adult story where we are following a young man whose father used to be part of the League. The League is a group of superheroes that keeps the city safe. However, one day after a really terrible accident, his father is left both a pariah as well as disabled due to a serious burn causing the majority of his hand to be amputated. Because of this, his father really resents the League as well as anyone with superhero abilities. So when our main character finds that he has superhero abilities, specifically the power of healing, and the League approaches him to join them, he obviously has a lot of conflicting feelings, but he's trying to find himself, and so he decides to join behind his father's back. But as he spends more time with the League alongside his new teammates, a group of misfits, he starts to wonder if there is something a little bit sketchy going on when other heroes start dying. On the side, he seems to be being stalked by a man known as the Man in Black, I believe, a mysterious vigilante who for some reason seems drawn to our hero. I ended up giving this story 4 stars. I was a little nervous going into it because it is an older story, and I was worried, you know, sometimes they have some problematic aspects to it, and there were like a few lines here and there where I was kind of like, I think an editor nowadays would ask the author to take those out, specifically about like a fat lady that was mentioned, as well as a couple lines describing like a women's behavior, where like women don't like looking at photos of themselves from 20 years ago when they were 20 pounds lighter kind of situation, where you're like, okay. But other than that, I really did quite enjoy this story and the messaging behind it. I really enjoyed the character development that both our character as well as some of the side characters faced throughout this story. I do sometimes wish that the world was fleshed out a little bit, because it seemed like there was potentially a slight dystopian aspect to it, because in the beginning he mentioned book burnings, but then we never really came back to that. So I was like, what's going on with that? But I definitely think that this was a really fun, intriguing story. I thought that pacing wise it was excellent. I really never wanted to put it down. I thought that the direction the plot took was maybe a little bit predictable, but was still satisfying to witness and still had an impact. So despite this being an older book, I definitely think it is worth checking out. And obviously this book is queer in that our character is a gay man, which in this book is not okay. Like, I was honestly a little taken aback by how homophobic the society in this book was, and that was a huge aspect of the story, where our character was trying to not only hide his powers from his father, but to hide his queerness from like literally everyone. So that was a little difficult to read, but it definitely was a big part of our story, and our character luckily did find a group of people that loved and accepted him the way that he was. Up next, I finished a audiobook. I will say all these books that I'm talking about I finished within the first week, because this book was actually on my May TBR, and I went ahead and used my reward that I got from my TBR game to be able to count it if I read it within the first week of the following month, which I did. And when I say within the first week, I mean like literally finished it on the last day of the first week. And that is The Maid by Nita Prose. I listened to this via an audiobook, and I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I went into it with relatively low expectations, which I sometimes think going into a book with low expectations is better than going in with high expectations, because then you're pleasantly surprised by the outcome of it. In this book, we are following Molly the maid, and she works at a hotel, and she loves her job. She loves cleaning, and one day one of their more prestigious guests ends up dead in his room. She finds him and ends up calling it in, and through some interviews with the police, they start to suspect that she is holding back and could potentially be the person who murdered him. So she and some of her acquaintances at the hotel start to try to find a way to prove her innocence. Molly the maid is autistic. It's never outright said in this book, but it's very clear by her behavior that she is. She's also dealing with the grief of her grandmother, who was the one that raised her. So she's kind of struggling with a big change in her life. I thought that the story was just a fun, easy read. I wouldn't call it a cozy mystery, but I would definitely call it a light mystery. I would say that the vibe is relatively mellow, even though the stakes are relatively high. Our character obviously does not want to go to prison, and obviously she and her friends want to make sure that the correct people, the dangerous people, end up behind bars without endangering themselves in the process. I thought that Molly was a really interesting character to be in the head of. I actually quite enjoyed the way that she spoke and described things. I thought it was very satisfying how into cleaning she was and how detail oriented she was. It made her a really great character to follow for a mystery story. However, she also is not really good with social cues, and so she misreads a lot of situations, which kind of leads her down the wrong pathways and causes her to kind of misjudge a lot of people, which is kind of how she got herself in this mess in the first place, and just kind of watching people help her through these situations, not judging her for getting herself in this situation, being very understanding about who she is as a person, and not looking down on her for it, which I thought was really heartwarming to watch. I think she had some really great friends that she didn't realize just how important they were to her and how important she was to them until these events transpired. And I just thought that it had a slight found family aspect to it as she started to gather these people closer around her. I will say this book will be frustrating at some times, just based off of the way people judge her and even the way that she judges other people. You're like, no, that's not at all what's going on. You're completely misreading the situation. But it is very realistic to someone who doesn't understand social cues as well as someone without autism. So I thought that the author did a relatively good job with that. And the ending of the story, I thought, just left me really satisfied and really happy, to be honest. And so I will definitely be checking out the second book. I definitely suggest the audiobook. I thought that the narrator did a really great job narrating our main character. I thought that she really brought her to life. So had a great time with this. Glad that I finally got to it. I will say this was one of my self-destruct books that I had, so I'm glad that I checked it out instead of just throwing it out. The next two books I'll be talking about were in a vlog that is already out, and this was for my 48-hour readathon. The first of which is going to be The Sweetest Remedy by Jane Igharo, and this is a contemporary romance where we are following Hannah, and Hannah has only met her father once when she was really young, and then he has never really been part of her life, despite the fact that she has always hoped that eventually that would change. That hope is kind of crushed when she receives notice that he has passed away, and that he would like her to attend his funeral so that she can meet her half siblings as well as the rest of the family. She's somewhat reluctant to go because she kind of says, oh, I've kind of moved on from needing anything from my father, but her mother's like, I really think that this would help you get some closure, so I would really like you to go. And so she decides to head over to Nigeria for the funeral, and when she arrives at her father's house, she not only finds out that her family didn't know she existed and are in fact just about to find out when she walks through the door, which is going to be a very awkward situation, but also that a man that she had a very strong connection with in San Francisco, where she lives, is a family friend of this family, and this allows the two of them to grow even closer. I ended up giving this story 4 stars. This was a 5-star prediction, so it didn't quite get there, but I still had a really good time with the story. I thought that the romance was really sweet and that Lawrence was a really great guy. There was definitely some stuff going on at the end with the third act breakup that was a little bit frustrating, but our character was definitely feeling a lot of insecurities at that time, so I can understand why she was lashing out. Throughout the story, we also get some chapters not just from Hannah and Lawrence, but from Hannah's 3 siblings as they are kind of dealing with losing their father and finding out that he wasn't 100% the man that they thought he was, and that they have this sister. Do they like her? Do they not like her? Do they want her as part of their life? Some of them are very eager and quick to accept her. Others are not. So there is definitely some family drama in here, but I really did enjoy watching those sibling dynamics develop throughout the story. I will say for me, I think the writing was a little bit on the simplistic side, which I think is why I didn't 100% get the emotion from the story that I was hoping I would get. But overall, I thought it was a well-rounded story, that the romance was well developed despite being rather quickly paced. It is a short story, and it was definitely an instant attraction kind of situation. But my favorite part of the story was definitely our character kind of winning the heart of this family, and this family kind of coming to terms with the fact that she is not the villain of the situation. If anything, she is just another victim of their father's behavior, and maybe even more so than them, because she spent years waiting for him and he never came for her. So I really enjoyed the story. 4 stars. Could definitely see myself reading more from this author. The other book that I read in that vlog was How to Get the Girl by Anita Kelly, and this book is also a contemporary romance. It is a sapphic romance. We are following Julie, who is the coach of a high school basketball team, and we are following Elle, who was a very popular basketball player in the local area, I think for the college basketball team, and she eventually went to Prose. However, after only a couple years in the Prose, she got an injury and ended up leaving the sport permanently. Since then, 8 years have passed, and she has never been on a basketball court since, and has not touched a basketball until she takes in a foster child, and that foster girl is a team member of Julie's basketball team. Julie used to be a big fan of Elle, like she had a crush on her and everything. And so when she sees Elle there, she asks her to be her assistant coach for the year because at this time she doesn't have one and she's floundering a little bit trying to keep this team together all by herself. And Elle actually ends up agreeing, and as they spend more time on and off the court, they form a really strong relationship with each other. I ended up giving this story 4 stars. I did not like it quite as much as Love and Other Disasters, which is the first book in this series. I did not read the second book yet, which I always forget the name of, but I will definitely be going back and reading that because I really do enjoy Anita Kelly's writing. I feel like her characters are incredibly relatable. If you watch that vlog, you will see just how deeply I related with Julie, and I just felt like what she was going through really could speak to a lot of people nowadays, and just the author's ability to reach into someone's soul was a little alarming, but also enjoyable because it's just always great to hear other people going through the same experiences as you and being able to learn from that. I also really enjoyed the romance aspect of the story. I thought that it was really sweet. The smut scene didn't work for me 100%, but luckily there was only one, so that wasn't too bad. I also enjoyed the character development as well as the foster child aspect of the story, as the two of them work together to really increase this girl's self-confidence and help her through this difficult time while her mother is in rehab. So a lot of great stuff were going on in this story. Not sure why I felt 4 stars was the right vibe. You know, when I rate books, I just kind of go based off of vibes, to be honest. And that was just kind of what this book was giving. I think it was just missing a little bit for me. I think I didn't connect to Elle as much as I did characters in the previous books and Julie, but my connection to Julie was so strong that Elle did end up fading into the background a little bit for me personally. So I had a great time, really enjoyed the author's humor and writing, and we'll definitely be checking out more work by her. All right, and the final book of the ones that I've read so far was once again for the superhero vlog, and that is going to be The Extraordinaries by TJ Klune. Really happy that I've read another TJ Klune book. I feel like it's been a hot second. The last one I read was, I think, in December, and it was In the Lives of Puppets. Did not love that one, so I was a little nervous to get into this. Maybe I've moved beyond TJ Klune. However, I gave this 4.5 stars. I had such a fun time with the story. Literally, I'm pretty sure for like 90% of my reading experience, I was just cheesing. I was just smiling the whole time I was reading this book. It is the first book in a trilogy, and we are following Nick, and he has ADHD, and he is also the son of a police officer, as well as an avid fan fiction writer for the local hero Shadow Star. In fact, he has a huge crush on Shadow Star. And one day after meeting Shadow Star, he decides it's his destiny to protect the city by Shadow Star's side and decides that he needs to try to become an extraordinary. So he sets out to try to do that, which leads to a lot of hilarity because jumping into contaminated rivers and trying to figure out if you can break into a nuclear plant is just not how you become a superhero in real life. That being said, he also has a wonderful friend group around him. He has a complicated relationship with his ex who keeps popping up, and his best friend Seth seems to potentially be in love with him, but has also been mysteriously absent a lot. On top of all of that humor and excitement, there was also some deeper emotions going on, which I always enjoy in TJ Klune stories. TJ Klune really loves a father-son relationship, which was definitely present in this story, especially since Nick's mother passed away, I think a couple years ago unexpectedly. So he and his father are still very much working through that grief and just trying to figure out how to live with each other. And on top of that, Nick is struggling with his ADHD. He has started a new medication that he's not really happy with, and he is just feeling a bit insecure because he's feeling like the people around him are starting to get a little bit annoyed by him, and the more he tries to be something else, the more he seems to be pushing people away. So this story is really about just kind of accepting who you are, accepting how incredible you are, and how much the people around you love you when you're not trying to be something else. So really enjoyed the relationships in here, really enjoyed the plot, because the superheroes in this story, they're Shadow Star and Pyrostorm, I believe, and it seems like tensions between this hero and villain is escalating throughout the story, and our character is also trying to figure out what the heck is going on with that. So overall, a really intense plot. I will say I thought I knew what was going on, and then TJ Klune kind of flipped the script and I was like sitting there looking stupid, but that's not the first time that's happened, and it's definitely not the last time it's gonna happen. So overall, a really great time, really excited to continue this series. Glad to be back in love fully with my man TJ Klune. All right guys, so those are the books that I have already read. Let's talk a little bit about the books that I'm currently in the middle of. I have 2 books that I'm currently actively working on, and then another book that I started during my 48-hour readathon but did not complete. So I'm going to talk about those 3 real quick, just let you know where I'm at with those. My current read is Lovesick Gods by Amanda Moyweisen, and I'm currently 61% through that, around the 230 page mark. I'm having a pretty decent time with this. I will say the strongest part of the story is the smut. The smut is great. So everything else is kind of mid. So I'm having a feeling that it's probably going to be around a 3.5 star, but this is the final book for my superhero vlog. So I am going to go ahead and finish that up, hopefully maybe even this weekend. Then we have my audiobook, which is A Marvelous Light by Freira Marsk. I'm not sure if I'm saying her last name right. I'm only 11% through that because I'm trying to get through the superhero vlog. I've definitely been prioritizing my physical reads over my audiobook. So I don't really have too many thoughts on it so far, but I am gonna go ahead and continue with that throughout the next week. And then as far as the book that I started during my 48-hour readathon, we have Outdrawn by Diana Gray. I'm currently 31% through that story, so I will go ahead and finish that up once I'm done with my Lovesick Gods book. Besides that, I have no idea what I'm going to be reading next or really prioritizing. If you watched my TBR, you'll see I had a pretty broad option and everything, so I could really choose from any of those. The only thing I can say for sure is that I'm going to be reading these 4 manga, which is the last 2 worlds of The Perfect World, as well as the first 2 books of Tokyo Ghoul. But other than that, we are just going to be reading kind of what benefits my team the most. I'm definitely going to be doing my best to read as much as possible, especially since I'm not contributing to them very much here for the first couple days of the readathon, since I'm working through Lovesick Gods, which I was more than 50% through when the readathon started, so I'm not able to count this book. But yeah, guys, this month has been going so great, and hopefully the second half goes just as well. I would love to know what books you guys have been reading this month, how it's been going, what your favorite book so far is. If you're taking part in Wonderthon, I hope your team is going well if you're Team Milan, and if not, I hope your team is having fun but not doing as well. That being said, guys, thank you as always for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!